chat room below. Let us know your name and any affiliations you're a part of and would like to share. As you introduce yourselves in the chat, I'll also introduce Community Nature Connection. So CNC is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to increase access to the outdoors for communities impacted by racial, socioeconomic, and disability injustices by eliminating barriers through advocacy, community-centered programming, and workforce development. Thank you for joining us for the Birding Basics in LA webinar today with Erica Gaeta. This webinar is brought to you as part of our Training Institute, which offers training and certification programs that are aimed at increasing knowledge and skill building in outdoor related fields. If you have any suggestions for trainings you'd like to see in the future, feel free to email us at training@communitynatureconnection.org. So some quick housekeeping. If you have any questions for Erica throughout the session, feel free to submit those to the Q&A section, and we'll get to them at the end, okay? And before I pass it over to Erica, join me in acknowledging this land. So we acknowledge the land on which CNC operates as the ancestral lands and home of the Tongva, Tataviam, Quiche, and Chumash peoples, original stewards and custodians of this territory. We recognize their continuing connection to the land, waters, and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So thank you all again for being here with us today. It is my pleasure to turn it over to Erica to lead you on this session on birding basics in Los Angeles.
All right, just a second. Let me close the window because my dog is barking. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Erica Gaeta. I am Chicana. I have indigenous roots in what is now known as Southeast Zacatecas. And I'm also a product of colonization, so I have Spanish and Italian heritage. A little bit about my educational background. I studied wildlife biology at Humboldt State University, and since graduating in 2013, I've been traveling and studying birds from as far north as Alaska to as far south as Colombia, and most recently I've been working in Mexico, and right now I'm getting ready for a job in New Mexico studying some birds out there. And I'm naturally an introvert person, so this is like a little bit of out of my comfort. I am like happiest outdoors with birds and like just viewing birds. And so during the pandemic, I've been finding a lot of like good medicine in birding here in LA. And I've been thinking about how can I give back to the community, and so this is something that arises from that. And so I just like thank you all for your interest in birding, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll try to keep up with them, and Bridget will also help me. I'm like open for it to be kind of interactive, and I say a lot, so I apologize. And I guess we're ready to get started, Bridget? Okay, let me share my screen. All right. All right, so this is Birding Basics 101 in LA. And so first, what is birding? Birding is basically the observation of birds in their natural habitats. And typically it's done during dawn and noon, but if you go to a park or step outside your house and see birds you can probably see them at any hour, but they're just more active during those early morning hours. And some of the benefits of birding is that it will allow you to, for me, like it's been kind of a reminder that we're also part of nature. So whenever I see birds, it's a constant reminder that we're part of this web and we share a home with birds. So connection with nature also helps to maintain mental and physical health. So it's encouraging you to get outdoors and get some good vitamin D, and also kind of gets your mind out of all that stressful situations that we're in, and just focus on the bird and what the bird is doing. And you get to learn all kinds of things from nature through birding. And you also like hone in your patience and listening skills. Those are really important skills for birding. And also an awareness of the seasonal changes. So there are birds that only visit LA during the winter time. And so in the fall, we'll begin to see like birds that are here only in the winter time. And so they're an indicator that fall is here. And right now, many birds are starting to get ready for migration, and they're like feeding and just getting their fat reserves ready for the big migration northward to their breeding grounds. And it's also very grounding. Like, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm stuck in traffic, I am like really overwhelmed and stressed. And I suddenly see a hawk on a light post or an exit sign, and they're like perched there, and it's just like a reminder, like, okay, like take it easy. And I just like focus on the hawk, but also like mindful of traffic and not trying to get in an accident or anything. So just like in the corner of my eye, I see them. And historically, who's a birder has been very white male dominated. So when I first started, I didn't feel welcomed, and I kind of felt like the odd one out. So it's an issue in the birding world, and this could be due to like barriers from not having access to green spaces, to time, like you have to put in time to go out there and learn some birds, as well as just the cost of travel, and equipment is also kind of expensive and an investment, and safety concerns. So in the past, we've seen how there's been discrimination against Black birders, and just like people of color not feeling safe in some outdoor spaces. And like I live in Inglewood, I forgot to mention that, but in some of our public parks, they're not necessarily safe spaces at times. And so just being mindful of those barriers do occur. And then as I've been going in my decolonization journey, I've realized that Indigenous people are like the OG birders. And so feeling like this is like my space too. I am entitled to this hobby, and our ancestors did this not only as a hobby, but also as a way of life, and having to use birds, or utilizing birds and the knowledge of birds to go about their day-to-day life. And an example of this is Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was an amazing like naturalist, and she knew so much about her natural environment as she created the underground, or as she utilized and created the Underground Railroad. And she utilized owl calls. So she learned owl calls and mimicked the owls to indicate to freedom seekers when it was safe to meet her in the woods. And she had like a lot of knowledge about the plants and plant medicines, And those are kind of things that we need, and we need to find those connections again. So it's about reclaiming and remembering those connections. And I also just want to acknowledge that a lot of bird names are honorific names. So in the birding world, we tend to use common names instead of scientific names. And these common names are honorific names where they honor colonizers that may have not appreciated all lives. So the Townsend's warbler is a beautiful bird who I saw yesterday at an urban park. And it's like a really beautiful bird. It's tiny, and it's named after a man that not only collected birds, but also the skulls of people of different races to kind of perpetuate these racist beliefs. So we have to think about where those names come from, and maybe working towards changing them. And I know people, birds names for birds is an IG account that is working towards doing that. And let me see. And so thinking about what our ancestors, or how our ancestors had and have those relationships with birds, and maybe that's something you can explore as you delve into the birding world. And another thing that I've noticed as I've been exploring in the birding field is that there's different types of birding, and it varies from person to person. So there's a thing called, or I kind of made it up, but there's like the trophy birders and then the subsistence birders. And trophy birders kind of like playing on trophy hunting and subsistence hunting, where trophy birding is like someone looking for birds just for the sake of having these giant eBird lists. And eBird is a online database where you can submit your bird sightings, and that's great for citizen science. But if you're just going out to become recognized as the person that got like the most birds at a certain place, that's kind of superficial and not so much like about learning more about the environment that you're in, although it like describes species richness. But is there something more that is motivating you to go out birding? And there's also people that will take a whole year off from work, or maybe they're retired, and we'll do a big year. And so that's there's a movie called Big Year that you can check out and kind of see what the birding culture is like, or the dominant birding culture. And they pretty much go throughout the United States and see how many birds they can count. So like birds just become a number, and it's about who can have the most birds on that list. And they're just like actively seeking these lifers. And lifers are birds that you only see once in your life. And so if you see a new bird, you say lifer, and that's just like a birding term that is commonly used among birders. And so subsistence birding, which is more of my style, is kind of more of a naturalist approach, where you value all birds. And I'm sure there's like gray areas where it's not like one above the other. As long as we're not hurting the bird, it's like everyone is entitled to their own birding style. And so as long as, and like, so back to subsistence birding, it's about enjoying all the birds, not just like the most brighter and more colorful and unique birds. and connecting with nature and having learning some survival skills from birds also. And so I have this picture of an osprey. An osprey, let's say if you were lost and hungry and didn't know where you were and you suddenly see an osprey, well, an osprey is an indicator that there's fish around. Ospreys eat fish, so it's so you know, like, okay, like the osprey's here, there must be some water and there must be fish around, and maybe you can find that fish source to survive. And also citizen science, as I mentioned, eBird is a great tool, and there's other apps where you can contribute to citizen science and also volunteer with bird conservation organizations like Audubon Society here in LA. And as I was preparing this presentation, a few years ago, I had the honor and privilege to be in the presence of Craig Torres, who is an elder, a Gabrieliano Tangba elder here in LA. And he shared with me the principles of the 3 R's. And so these are his teachings, and I kind of adapted them to birding ethics. And these are important for us to remember as we go into the field and put in the effort to learn about the birds, and just being mindful. And so the first one is recognition. So as we learn and work towards learning the birds that surround us, we must also recognize the people, the plants, and the landscapes that are indigenous to the landscapes that we live and visit. And so acknowledging the indigenous people, and I'm a little nervous, I have to breathe. And I also have an image of this painting that was created, and it's what we believe LA looked like before all the concrete and when our rivers were flowing freely without all the concrete. And so we had wetlands that were like so huge and beautiful, and now we have small remnants of wetlands in the Bayona wetlands, and just like a reminder that we have to, like, or whenever we're outdoors, like kind of imagining what it must have looked like before all the concrete is something that I do, and I like try to recognize all the changes and impacts humans have on the land. And the next one is respect. So we have to respect all of our relatives and be mindful that we're entering and sharing space with these birds. So if we're going to San Gabriel Mountains, we are entering their home and giving them space and not trying to be so invasive. And there's also, like, some people like to play vocalizations that can be very disturbing to birds. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, there's an energy exchange with the birds. So they're aware of your presence when you're out there long before you see them. So when you do see them, like, stay calm and show them respect and gratitude. This little, oh, let me see. This gray gnatcatcher up here is one where I was sitting by a river and it came really close to me, and it's like a gift whenever a bird comes really close to you, and just like showing it respect and honor. And so the last one is responsibility. We all have the responsibility to give back and protect each other. That's everyone. We all share this planet, so we all have that responsibility. And birds are declining, so we have to be mindful of our impacts. And I gave like a few little examples of what we can do to protect birds as we go on this birding journey. And so that's recreate responsibly. And I apologize for the graphic image, but it's just to highlight how important it is that we keep our bird feeders, if we have bird feeders, that we are cleaning them regularly, because it's like the pandemic with us humans, and like sanitation and cleanliness is important to keep us healthy, and it's the same for birds. So being mindful of like, if your bird feeder is constantly getting birds and there's like droppings and it's just dirty, you need to clean it, and so that you're not unknowingly spreading diseases among the birds. And there's also like products that you can buy that are bird friendly, like shade grown coffee that they cultivate coffee without cutting forest. So they kind of intermingle the coffee plants, and it's also helpful for birds because they eat the pests that grow on the coffee. So there's like this relationship. And planting native plants and habitat for our birds in our backyards is a great option too. And so for birding, there's 5 key principles for identifying birds. And the first one is size and shape, and then color, pattern, sound, behavior, and habitat and distribution. So these are all helpful and should be something that you're constantly practicing as you go in your birding journey. And so an example of how to utilize these 5 techniques is with the common raven and the American crow. And as you see, they're very similar if you like look at them from afar, but they have these differences. And the common raven tends to be a little bigger, and it has that slight point on the beak. And one thing that I like to remember from the raven, so whenever it's flying and a crow is flying too, you can maybe look at their tail feathers. So you'll see that the raven creates this V shape with its tail. And an easy reminder for me is that there's a V in raven. So that's the raven there. And then with the crow, it tends to have like a flatter tail. Crows are a little smaller as well, and they have that caw sound that they promote or they give. And the common raven like is very notorious for also mimicking other things. So it doesn't always croak. It makes other cool sounds. And they're very smart birds. And a little bit about sex as well is that in the birding world, we kind of sex birds by their plumage, and sometimes that's not always possible. So with the American crow and the raven, you can't sex them by looking at them. They both look the same. And then there's other birds that are non-binary, and this is a bird that doesn't occur here in Los Angeles. It's it's a robin, and it's displaying the male plumage on one side and the female on another. And this is something that occurs rarely in nature, but it does occur in the bird world as well. And this is a common meme that is shared among the birders, and it says how non-birders describe a bird, and they say they're in their yard and want you to ID it. So we're constantly getting like, hey, do you know what this bird is? It had so and so, like all these like crazy descriptions, and I have no idea what they're talking about. And so it's helpful to know the parts of the bird. So you can like see the crown. So if they're trying to describe this house sparrow, you can say it had a gray crown. The nape was kind of cinnamon colored. The throat was black, and the back had like black speckling and kind of brown, and a white chest. And so those are kind of things that you want to keep in mind. And this image is often found in your field guides, so you can like refer to it. And I just also wanted to point out how the house sparrow is, so this is the male. I don't know, can you see my mouse? Okay, so
Yes.
this is the house sparrow, the male, and then this is the female here. And so how different they are, and they're the same species, but how they differ is kind of something that happens in the sparrows and warblers and other species of birds you can't tell, as I was mentioning previously. Oh, I forgot to mention. And for raptors, it's really important to look at this kind of silhouette that they give off. So like the wing shape, and also the lining of the wings and the tail. These are all like really good things to look at, and then you can ID it using your field guides. And so for tools for helping you identify birds. So a good one is binoculars. And sometimes you're out in the field and you have your camera and you can take a picture, and you can use that photograph to help you identify birds. And also having a field guide is really helpful to kind of narrow down what kind of bird it might have been. And it'll give you like categories, and you can kind of do some inspector work in there and narrow it down to your bird. The Merlin app is something that I really like to recommend for beginner birders, because it's very accessible. It's a free resource. You can download it on your phone, and it has, depending on how much space you have on your phone, you can download different packages. Like when I worked in Mexico, I downloaded a package that is like specific for Northwest Mexico. And so like it has different options and packages that you can download for free. And then there's also spotting scopes and tripods, but that's more for like looking at birds from far away, like shorebirds, or yeah, it's mostly for shorebirds that you would use a tripod, or maybe like looking at hawks from afar. And so a few tips on binoculars. That first number that is on your binocular, or if you're shopping and like or thinking about purchasing binoculars, that first number is the magnification. And then the second one is the diameter of the front lens. And so that is how much light is going to being emitted in your view. And so the bigger the number, it's going to be more light, but it might make your binoculars heavy. And that first number, I would recommend it to be between 7 and 10. More than 10, it gets a little hard to stabilize your view. So if it's between a 7 and a 10, that's a good binocular. And let me show you my binoculars. Let's see. How do I stop sharing? Okay, okay. So I have this pair, which is a Vortex Crossfire, and this is 10 by 42, and so this one's a little bit more expensive. I think I like bought it at Big Five for maybe 180 or something like that. And so they're a little pricey. Yeah. Um, but and it's definitely an investment. And what I like about this one, I'm not sure about other brands, but this has a lifetime warranty. So if I were to trip and fall and break my binoculars, like they will completely fix it, and if it's unfixable, they will replace it. And so that's something to think about when you're purchasing binoculars. And a few tips on how to use the binoculars. So some of them will have these little eye cups, and if you wear glasses, you want to put them down, and if you don't wear glasses, then you'll want to kind of put these up, because these give your eyes enough space from the lens to have a good view. And they'll also have like little adjustment knobs here, so you'll want to look with your right eye and kind of adjust it till you see a clear image, and that'll adjust the other one, and you'll be able to see nice and clear. And this is the focus knob here. And another tip for beginners is if you have a bird, let's say it's on a branch and you're looking at it, so keep your eye on the bird and then bring your binoculars to your eyes, because if you do this and like try to look for in the branch, by the time you find the bird, it's probably flown off. So that's just like a helpful tip. And also, if you let kids borrow or use binoculars, just being mindful of where the sun is. You don't want to face them towards the sun and like have them blind themselves. And those are binoculars. And let me just look at the comments. Okay.
Erica, just a notification. We're at the halfway mark.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, let me share. Okay. And for field guides, so field guides are great, and they come in various shapes and forms. They will have different images. Here I have an example of the National Geographic field guide and the Kaufman. This is a field guide that's also available in Spanish. And let's say you saw this bird out in the Santa Monica Mountains. Well, you're looking at what stands out to you. So this bill is very curved and unique, and it also has a long tail. And what is it doing? How is it singing? So it might be singing like this beautiful song. This is a bird that's in the Mimidae family. So it's also a relative to the mockingbird. And so it has like these intricate calls and songs that are really nice to hear. And so you'll use your field guide to kind of narrow down what that bird is. And something that is helpful with the field guides is that you will see these range maps. So these range maps are helpful for you to look at and kind of see, like, does this bird even occur here? And we will get like a few occasions where there's a rare bird that will show up. And so if you're like, I know it's this bird, even though the range map is saying it's not, like, that's something you might see something that's rare. But most of the time, these are pretty good indicators of, okay, does this bird occur here? And so this is the California thrasher, and we see it commonly here in California, and it's year-round resident. And I had a video, but maybe you guys can look at it later. And the Merlin app, so a little bit about how to use the Merlin app. It's pretty straightforward. So let's say you saw this bird here. It's perched on a wire. It's flying and catching flies, but you don't know what it is, and you want to know. So you'll use the Merlin app, and you'll put in your where you are and what size of the bird it is. So it gives you like a range of size. And then the colors, it's like buffy brown, gray. I could have put black also. That tail is black. And then what it's doing, so it's perched on a wire. And then you'll get a list of birds that it could possibly be, depending on that area. And so that first one, that's our bird, it's the Say's Phoebe. And something cool about this application is that you can hear the songs and the calls of the birds. So that's a helpful tool to help you remember or learn the different sounds that these birds make. And again, here's the range maps. And so now I'm gonna talk about a little bit about the birds that you might see in your backyard, or San Gabriel Mountains, or Santa Monica Mountains, urban parks. So here in LA, what we may see. And the first one I have is the Anna's hummingbird. The Anna's hummingbird is, I was hiking at the San Gabriel Mountains, and it was just singing and singing. And I'm going to see if it's gonna work. So this is the song. And so you'll often hear them displaying this song. And if I hear a song, I like try to look for the female also, because the male, this is the male, and this is a female, or it could be an immature male. But if a male is singing, there's likely a female around, and he's like showing her his songs and displaying his throat and fancy iridescent feathers. And they also have this very cool display that if you have ever witnessed it or see it, they fly up high, up to 130 feet, and then zoom down and make like this little, their tail makes a little chirp, which is really cool to witness. And you're just like, oh my God, that's like so romance in the air when those displays are happening. And also, when I first started birding, I remember seeing a female that had spider web on its bill, and I was like, oh my God, no, like it's been tangled. But they create their nests with these spider webs. Another hummingbird that we have is the Allen's hummingbird. And this one's a little different than the Anna's, where it has more orange, and it has an orange iridescent feathers on its throat and green on its back. And it's same as the previous hummingbird, where the female and the immature male. So an immature male is kind of like the younger first year kind of male, where they're still kind of growing their feathers, so they look very similar to the female. And they'll be kind of hovering from flower to flower. So hummingbirds are great pollinators, and these guys are year-round residents here in LA, but also migrate. And the Yellow-rumped Warbler, so this is one that is getting ready for migration, and I saw it yesterday, a flock of them, and I see them in my backyard too. They're constantly flying and calling and looking for different spiders and insects under the leaves of trees and shrubs. So that's a bird that you might be able to see in your backyard, and look for that yellow rump and the yellow throat. And so this is the male, and then the female is here with a lighter yellow on its throat. And we have there's two species And here on the west, we have Audubons, and Myrtles is on the east coast, and it has a white throat. It doesn't have that yellow. The next one is the white-crowned sparrow. I'm gonna see if I can play the call. This. And so this is call. And it's a really beautiful call that I often hear, like, and it's like an indicator of fall whenever they arrive from migration. They're a really cool bird to watch. I like to go to Bayona wetlands, and I often see them bathing in the puddles or just hanging out in flocks. Oops. And so it has that notable white crown, and this is a younger, immature white-crowned sparrow. And these sparrows, you tend to not be able to sex. But you can age them. So this is like a first-year bird, and then after the first year, it'll start getting that white crown. And some cool facts that I found on All About Birds is that the oldest known sparrow was 13 years old. So how like long they live is pretty awesome to know. And also how if a bird goes to its breeding grounds, it tends to be attracted to someone that kind of sings its language versus like someone of a foreign language or like dialect for birds. And if a bird is kind of like in between one dialect of a caw and another caw, it'll be bilingual and like be able to sing both songs. So I thought that was really cool. And a little bit of how to determine, like, is your bird a sparrow or a warbler? So look at those bills, and the warblers tend to have like a thinner bill versus a sparrow. So sparrows eat more seeds and things like that, versus warblers tend to be more eat insects and like tiny little insects and flies and things like that. So like looking at those shapes. The next one is the house finch. House finch is a very common bird that we often see in our backyards, and it's often calling, and it's very social and a great seed disperser. I remember watching this one eat guava and just like spitting out the seeds. So those are really cool birds, and how they've lived, like the female was recorded to be 11 years old is pretty awesome. The next one is the bushtit. I don't know where the name comes from, but these are one of my favorite birds to see in my backyard. And they're very social, and they're constantly calling and chirping, and they're just like searching under the leaves for insects and spiders. And they're very active and hyper, and they're so tiny and very cute little birds. And I apologize for going so fast, but I want to cover all of these. Let's see, where am I on time? Okay. The next one, this is one that you will see, you could see it in the Santa Monica Mountains, or in like areas where there's cliffs and boulders. And it's one of my favorites because it's so small, but it demands like presence. It's often like on the top of a canyon, and it's calling it, and its call makes it sound big, but it's like, it's such a tiny bird. And let me see if I can play it. So this is a bird that you might hear whenever you're hiking. And it kind of echoes in the cliffs, and it's just a little reminder that hey, I'm small, but I can make a loud sound too. And they kind of creep in the crevices of the cliffs and eat insects and spiders, and are also known to steal from spiders and catch their food. The red-breasted sapsucker is also a cool bird if you ever have the chance to see it. They're very loud, and they drill holes in the wood. So they're in the woodpecker family, and they create these wells on the tree where they lick the sap that comes from the trees. And these are really great for also hummingbirds. So hummingbirds take advantage of those holes that the sapsuckers create. And they're nest cavity makers. So they like nest in these crevices. The next one is the Acorn Woodpecker. I don't know if you've ever heard one, but they're very loud. I've seen them at Griffith Park. And they live where there's oaks, and also in the pine oak woodlands. And you can see them in suburban parks where there's oaks present. They eat acorns, and they store them in these trees where they create these little crevices, and as the acorn starts to dry, it becomes loose, and they like put it in another hole so that it's safe from squirrels and other animals. And they tend to utilize like dead trees or dead limbs, so they don't hurt like living trees. And the next one is American Kestrel. American Kestrels are of the smaller falcons, and we often see them flying or perched, searching for prey during the daytime. And so looking at those flights, and so this is a bird of prey, this is a raptor, and looking at those wing shapes, and those field markers of the little mustache here, and a lot of the speckling. So this is the male here, and the female is a little doesn't have that rusty color on the head. And then during courting, the male will gift the female food and as gifts. The next one is a northern harrier. So this is a bird of prey, also a raptor, and you'll often see it flying low to the ground. Looking at that behavior, and a good indicator or an easy way to identify the northern harrier is if you get a glimpse of that white rump. That's like it's a northern harrier with that white rump. And with raptors, they're probably one of the more challenging for me. They have different morphs. So like red-tailed hawks and other raptors will have variation in their color. So that's something to be mindful when trying to identify raptors. The double-crested cormorant is a seabird, and you can often see it at Bayona wetlands or even in the ocean, and it eats fish. So oftentimes, like in fish facilities, these guys cause some trouble with all the fish hatchery people. They're not a fan of the double-crested cormorant, but I think they're really cool. And you'll often see them diving for fish. So they like dive and chase fish underwater, which is really cool. And like the oldest known double-crested cormorant was 22 years old. That's a long time. That's really cool data that was collected. And the Bufflehead, so this is a duck species, and probably one of my favorite ducks. And for the ducks, you want to look at their behavior. So there is diving ducks and dabbling ducks. So this is the diving duck. It will dive underwater and it'll disappear for a little while, and it's like searching for invertebrates and crustaceans and like other aquatic prey. Versus other ducks will kind of stay on their surface and like dabble, kind of like the mallard is a very common duck that we see in cartoons and things like that. That is a dabbling duck. So, and they sometimes will stick their tail up in the water, versus a diving duck will emerge its whole body. So that's a behavior to kind of help you narrow down what kind of duck species you're looking at. And as I was creating this presentation, I learned about how the Bufflehead distribution is restricted to the northern flicker. So this is a woodpecker species, and they create these crevices, and these Buffleheads will nest in those crevices. So it's kind of has like this relationship with this other bird, which is really cool. Next is our shorebirds. And it's we have the sanderling, which we often see on the coast, kind of running with their feet, running away from the waves. And I see we're running out of time, so maybe I'll stop and kind of skip through this one. And I want to kind of end at the western snowy plover, which is one of our threatened bird species here in LA. And if you ever have like the opportunity to see this bird, it's very special, and we all have to like do our part to conserve our coast so we can protect this bird. And a lot of threats that impact this bird is at Dockweiler Beach, we have enclosures, and like a lot of people don't even respect these like areas that are set out for this bird. And so like being mindful of signs and areas that are created to protect this bird is something that we all need to do. And people will also bring their dogs. Like I just adopted a dog, but I always keep my dog on a leash just to prevent my dog from chasing birds. So when a dog is chasing a bird, it's causing the bird to exert a lot of energy, and like it worked really hard to search for that food, and it's wasting all this energy running away from your pet just because you decided to leave it off leash. And so that's something we can do to protect this bird. And so looking at the shapes, and a lot of the info that I utilize comes from All About Birds, and you can go on that website to learn more. And I guess we'll leave it up to questions, and we have a little surprise at the end also.
One of the questions was if you had a specific LA region bird guide to recommend.
No, not specifically, but you'll want to either get like Birds of North America or Birds of the West So that's a good one to look at. So Western birds and not like all the birds.
There's another question here about apps for kids.
I would say the Merlin app is a great one to utilize with kids.
Do you provide this course or training in Spanish?
No, but I can. My niece just walked in.
Okay, I'll follow up with you about that. Are there any, do you know how many raptors roam through Los Angeles?
Off the top of my head, I don't. Raptors are probably one of my most challenging of birds that I'm still working towards mastering, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Are there any other green spaces you recommend for bird viewing in LA other than the Bayona wetlands?
Yeah, so there's the Santa Monica Mountains. Griffith Park is a good one. I tend to stay close to home. So Kenneth Hahn is a great one. And just different trails in the San Gabriel Mountains you can explore.
Okay, it looks like, oh, what's your favorite bird?
Mine? I get that question a lot, but there's just like so diverse, and there's so many that I can't pick one. They all have like a special story behind them, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that wraps it up for questions. Want to move on to the
Yeah.
surprise?
All right. Well, as a thank you to everyone and their interest, we're going to be raffling a field guide. And so we're going to generate some names and see who's the lucky winner of a field guide. And I just thank you so much.
Kelly, awesome. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will make this recording available to you all. I'll also talk to Erica about a Spanish version as well as sharing the slides. Feel free to send any follow-up questions that you have. We can share that with the group as well. And if you have any suggestions or ideas for trainings you'd like to see us offer in the future, feel free to send that to us as well. Thank you.
I do have a quick question if you have time for it. I just wanted to know what would be like a good entry-level pair of binoculars that you might recommend, something that's not $180.
I think there's other versions of the Vortex brand that you can look at. Bushnails are a little bit more affordable, but they tend to like give you problems after a while. So it like depends on the investment and like the long run of it. So it's like you pay for what you want. And I bought these at Big Five, and I think they have others, so you can like check out what they have and just shop around. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just, what about for children's binoculars? If we want to get them out for kids on hikes, is there a good one that's good?
That I know of, no. Like I purchased some for my niece, but they're missing, and so it's like it depends on how much you want to spend for them. Thank you.
I see there was a question here that I didn't get to. Daniel asked what birds you're going to be studying in New Mexico.
Oh, I'm going to be studying pinon jays and other songbirds that are associated with juniper pines or junipers and pinon pine and ponderosa pine. So looking at that habitat and what birds are nesting in those areas.
Awesome. I mean, if anyone else has questions, feel free to unmute your mic and ask away.
I'm sorry I kind of rushed it, but hopefully it kind of gave you a little bit of a feel of the different techniques and skills to kind of eliminate and kind of get that bird that you're trying to identify. And this is the field guide.
And there was an IG page you recommended earlier in the session.
Oh, yeah. It was Birds for Bird Names. I can maybe type it in here.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, there's no more questions, we can go ahead and end the session. Thank you again, Erica. That was really informative, really engaging. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.